Welcome to the FMCG guys. I'm your co-host, Daniel Torres, accompanied by my other co-host, Efrain Rosario. Hi, Efrain.
Hey, Daniel. Good to be with you as always. How are things?
Very good, and excited about our chat today with someone that you actually know personally.
Yeah, so Jeannine and I go back quite a few years from our time together at Coca-Cola. So I'm excited to hear what she's up to. And actually, what she's been doing at her current company as well.
Yeah, because Jeannine Ferguson, after a background in FMCG, is currently heading up marketing for Northern Europe at one of the main sustainable packaging companies, DS Smith. So we're very interested to have her here to understand why packaging goes further than judging a book by its cover. So in topics such as new routes to market like e-commerce, packaging has become very relevant, and as well as the big push that companies are having in sustainability makes packaging one of the key elements when it comes to brand building, but also to driving a modern organization and consumer goods. Hello, Jeannine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Efrain. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's good to see you again, Jeannine. It's been a while. We definitely have to make sure that we catch up offline as well.
Oh, totally, Efrain. We're going to have to do that. We have many fond memories.
Absolutely.
Which, by the way, we were talking before about you guys knowing each other. How did you actually meet?
Oh, my goodness. There's a good question. I imagine we probably met on several, was it WebExes back in those days?
Yeah, I guess we're dating ourselves, but yeah, I guess we were back in the time of WebEx.
Where there was no video?
No, but I think we actually, I'm not sure, but I know we did meet in person several times because we had the chance to work on a couple projects together at our prior employer. I think in fact you hosted us at one point for meetings in London as well. So
I remember bringing you. Yeah, you came into London, and
the Wimpole Street.
It was awesome. We had this amazing agenda. We had super great topics. I had a lot of people fly in from Europe, and you were the special guest from Atlanta at the time. Yes, I can't remember the year that was. Probably 2014.
Probably so, 2013, 2014. So, Daniel, to answer your question, Jeannine and I have known each other for, I guess, close to 8 years now.
Oof. Yeah. I think that's nearly 10 years.
Long time that is.
But so we have a shared love and passion for FMCG. Let's just say that.
Exactly. Further to this, Jeannine, so the audience gets acquainted with you. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your background in FMCG before you got into packaging.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, my start in the FMCG world was back in the mid-90s, and that was in the world of retail. So I started off in what was the mother of all retailers back in the mid-1990s. Was with Marks and Spencer. I started on their graduate scheme, which was a super popular, really hard to get into graduate scheme, because it was seen to give you a super amazing training and grounding into the commercial world of retail. So that was back in the day when there was no advertising done by them as a retailer. It was all about how you build success in store. And my start there was commercial management in store. I did foods, I did lingerie, I did children's wear, I did homeware. Actually brought homeware into the UK, Marks and Spencer, taking a lot of inspiration from merchandising practices in the US, actually. And I think we were making $1 billion profit on a 12 billion turnover. So it was a super grounding to really, really, I guess, start my career, which was all about understanding behavior, shopper behavior, right at the front line, and how do you actually influence people by meeting their needs, and all the different techniques you can do with that. So I had 3 amazing years learning and figuring out about where you locate things in store, how do you invest in your service. If you move tomatoes from this side to that side, if you locate it next to this, you can actually grow your sales by 1,000%. How you can offer solutions, shop within shop. We were the first to start doing that, cross-merchandising, etc., and how that can exponentially change how you drive sales. So that was the beginning of my kind of love affair of FMCG and I guess shopper and consumer behavior. And I then, when I left Marks and Spencer, went into, I guess, supply side, going into retail, which was beverages, and started my lovely long career with Coca-Cola for 17 years. And in that part of my career, I guess I danced in all different disciplines, from operations, frontline sales, then into national accounts, and then into marketing and all sorts of marketing, whether it was customer marketing. I moved channel marketing into shopper marketing. I was leading that function at the time in the UK when we decided to go, actually, boundaries are blurring, things are changing in terms of behavior. We need to stop looking at trade as channels and actually see it as environments of behavior and pockets of behavior, and then market to that. And that was at the Coca-Cola bottler for 10 years. And then I moved into the Coca-Cola company, where I looked after global customers, worked with them to develop beverage strategies and how do we grow their business through innovation. And then also looked at commercial and shopper marketing across Europe. So 17 great years at Coke before I then went into the world of still fast-moving consumer goods, but consumer healthcare at Johnson & Johnson. And there, my career was really about, building the philosophy of in-store excellence and shopper behavior, and how do you understand all of that to really drive successful brand development and innovation development in that space. I think we learned at that point a lot of our launches were not succeeding in market, and it's because we weren't thinking about all of that at the very beginning. So that's what I did there for about 4 years, amongst many other things. And that took up about 25 years of my career. So very lucky to work with amazing brands, amazing people, amazing assets, new product launches, as well as kind of revamping brands that have been around a long time and making sure that you keep them relevant in a very changing world. I then left and did a bit of a foray, similar to you, Ephraim. I left J&J just because I didn't want to move to another country, which was what was required as part of a restructure there for senior leaders. And I didn't want to leave the UK at the time. So I took some time out and set up my own business, did some consulting for some big brands, small brands, startups, established. Loved it, really, really loved it. Amazing seeing the entrepreneurial spirit of a lot of people. I'm still actually working with some of the startups that I advised back then. Gavin Sisters are one of them. We're helping them build a brand, build a business. They're really passionate about well-being. And in fact, we've been developing a organic mushroom coffee for them to run alongside their detox retreats and wellness seminars. And they actually have also launched podcasts where they're interviewing amazing people in the whole well-being space. So I did that for literally a couple of years over the pandemic. But my intention was always to come back into a corporate stint, into a corporate organization. And through my entrepreneurial time, I guess my interest in sustainability and the circular economy and kind of this whole piece where overconsumption is out, we need to do things slightly different, was really growing. And the opportunity with DS Smith, who I will admit I had not heard about before the opportunity presented itself. And I'm now in packaging. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think, listening to you recap, those 25 years of amazing experience. I think you and I met when you were working in customer marketing. I think that's when we first met. And then obviously we had several years we worked together on some of the big initiatives at Coke as well. But I'm really interested to hear about DS Smith and your role in particular in terms of what is it you're doing with them, bringing some of that great FMCG experience to the world of sustainable packaging.
Yeah, great. So DS Smith, so I don't know if you know, but it started back in the 40s, the Smith family in East London, doing boxes, and they, quickly became known for their commitment to quality and precision, and kind of following 50 years post that, they grew by acquiring lots of other businesses, and they also grew their capability, and extended into paper and recycling, because that kind of gave them a full cycle, a full view of their customers' worlds and problems. And here they are today. They've now just recently become a FTSE 100 company, 6 billion turnover. And their main vision is to become kind of the leading supplier in sustainable packaging. Now, what I loved and was really interested about the company and the opportunity coming here was their deep understanding that the world around us is changing massively. The world is transforming. Cities, populations are going through so much change, a lot of that being, catapulted by digital revolution. So the way people are shopping is changing significantly. And at the heart of that, us as consumers are wanting what we want, tailored for us, delivered when we want, in a format that we want, now or whenever we want. And then suddenly we're also wanting that with as little impact on the world as possible. So it's this like crazy complex conundrum going, wow, I sold that. And, this is as a company who is, supplying into every single business you can imagine, because packaging and display is ubiquitous, for all categories, not just FMCG. And they want to solve for those problems, because packaging, in response to all of those changing shopper habits, can make a massive difference. And the purpose for the company is very much about redefining packaging for a changing world, so that it can play a far more responsible manner in solving for a lot of those problems. And it really is trying to lean into the change that is required to move us away from this kind of linear economic model, which is make, take, throw away, and move it into a more circular world where we are far more conscious about what we're doing, and designing the practices by which we do it to make it far more circular, far more sustainable. And the business model and purpose is all about driving that into the heart of its business. So that in a way really blew me away when I started talking to them about what they're trying to do. And I thought, God, this is really fascinating. I've spent most of my career understanding behavior, shopper behavior, and how you meet those needs. But now I'd love to actually use a lot of that and come into a world that is trying to think, okay, it's not just about doing more. It's about how we do it and how we do it better, so that it is more circular. So I've kind of come into it to learn as much as it is to give. From our background, and my role is to lead marketing and innovation for Northern. I've taken a Northern Europe role, done all sorts over the last 10 years, and EMEA, Europe. This one is Northern Europe. Marketing per se is still a fairly newly establishing function in the B2B world. It has a different kind of meaning from in the B2C world. But there is huge appetite to kind of go, right, how can marketing really understand us? The operations and the technical innovation in the business is really super. But sometimes when you listen to technical people speak, it's really hard to understand. And equally, a lot of consumers and people that we are selling to don't necessarily understand a lot of that. So marketing can play a really great role in creating value around a lot of the good things that is being done, as well as helping analyze and assess the market that we're operating in, understand where we should be playing as well as how we should be playing, versus just responding to technical briefs as such. So really exciting, helping to establish marketing as a function and be a business partner. To help us grow and also speak to a lot of our customers who don't know a lot about what goes on in this space. I'll be honest, and Ephraim, it'd be good to get your views on this. Even the businesses that we were in, which are leading, dynamic businesses, quite often packaging or display was thought about quite late on. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you now, coming into this role, there is so much better you can do if you can think about the packaging and the display much earlier on in the design process or the innovation process. And you can make a massive difference, not only to your brand and how it can be sold, but basically how it's made, and then how it impacts your supply chain, which can have a huge impact on the sustainability of the brand. So that's I think where I'm really trying to focus our teams on how we tell that story, how we market that story, so that people understand the value that packaging can play. Equally, in the world that we've come from, in the last 10 years, it's been about cost reduction, and quite often people look at packaging, how do you just get lower costs, without knowing then that the damaging that you're doing. And actually, what I say, how I look at packaging, is probably one of the most valuable levers you've got in your marketing mix. And not all brand marketeers are thinking like that. It's a massive opportunity to change.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Because ultimately, packaging, when we go into the store, we're not seeing the soap, we're not seeing the cereals, we're not seeing the final product, we're seeing the packaging. I mean, how important is it to build and differentiate the brand, the packaging? Because it's, as you said, with Ephraim, it's probably an afterthought, but it's super important, I guess, no?
Well, it's hugely important. I mean, we've probably seen so many gaffes in our time over the years. Listen, I've seen brands being launched, the companies that are all about eco in terms of the ingredients, and then they launched in primary packaging that wasn't recyclable.
Wow.
Nobody thought about it. I've seen brands being launched, and the secondary packaging that was to go on shelf omitted key messages, and yet we know that shoppers, when they go in store, they are faced with 1,000 choices, and if you're not standing out and getting your message really clear, people will not select you. Shoppers will not select you. So all of that can be thought about, and it makes a massive difference. Then on the supply chain side of things, thinking about how many products you plan into your packaging boxes to go on shelf is super important. The amount of packs that have been developed and launched that then haven't thought about, right, what retail environment are they going into? What shelves are they going to sit on? Therefore, how many packs need to go in there? And either they don't fit on the shelf, so therefore they can't be stocked, or they don't think about the configuration of those pack sizes. And you can then be detrimental on how many shippers and pallets you are creating as a result of that size of packaging. The pallets then that you're creating means the amount of lorries that you're putting on the road. And you can actually probably put 2 to 3 more lorries on the road than you actually need to if you haven't thought about the size of the packaging. That then talks about your carbon footprint, all of those kind of things, never mind the fuel consumption and the costs then that go into your P&L. So there are so many elements to be thought about when it comes to packaging beyond just making a difference on the brand experience in shelf. Although that said, the massive swing we've seen to e-commerce in the last couple of years, this is where you've seen real winners and losers. And some brands have been really smart and really fast at really understanding that kind of first moment of truth that the e-commerce then brings to their brands. And they've been really smart at designing their packaging to land in people's homes. With the first moment it lands, you are getting a brand experience that is telling the story of that brand. But many brands have not got that right. Just at Christmas there, I was, when COVID kind of the lockdowns all stopped, and I think I had my first black tie and I realized I needed a nice new dress. I ordered one online the same time as ordering my daughter a new sports top from Nike. Both arrived, one was £20 from Nike. The dress from a black tie, I won't say who it's from, but it was a lot more expensive. But the high value dress arrived in package, like a bag with tape, no messaging, and a really poor experience, versus the one from Nike, 20 quid, everything from the paper bag that it was delivered in, talking about the whole supply chain to deliver that, and really bringing to life the brand purpose, never mind the quality of the item that it was just incredible.
Yeah. It's funny,
incredible.
I remember having that same kind of experience ordering something for my daughter from Nike. And I remember looking at the packaging and just seeing how much it communicated, not just in terms of the actual copy or the messaging, but even just in terms of, like you said, how it was built. And I think I love how you expressed it, which is that it's in essence the first glimpse, or one of the first glimpses into the brand experience. So it can obviously communicate who you are from a sustainability standpoint, but it communicates a whole lot more too, right? In terms of just what the brand stands for. So I've had both of those experiences where you get the packaging that does it really well, and then I've also had the experience, like we said, where it's like, what's in this, paper mache thing that I've gotten here in the mail.
Absolutely. And it sticks with me. It's really stuck with me. It really has stuck with me, and it does put a question on value for it as well. The other thing that I've started to become aware of as well, and I think we've got opportunity here, is when you get something, we know that returns is really important in the whole e-commerce shopper journey, and the amount of packaging you get through that then you have to return. But it was actually difficult to open. So when you opened it, you were tearing it. So you've already ruined the box. And then you have to return it in another piece of packaging, and you just chuck that one away.
Yeah.
Now, I've discovered here at Dear Smith, we develop packaging. I don't think we're doing a great job telling everyone about it, but you can design packaging, to be fit for the size so that you're not shipping air. So you're not, you're making sure that what you put in, you're not wasting any space. But you can have a certain tape that you can just open it really easily. And if you need to return it, there's a double tape in it that you just slip it back, and you don't need to use any extra tape to return it. So you're using the same box that was reused, and you're not using any plastic tape to actually put it back in.
Yeah.
So there's like simple behaviors there that we've got a huge opportunity to, train shoppers and consumers, but also make sure that suppliers and brands are choosing those packaging options which allow that to be easy and convenient.
So it's interesting. So, you've touched on a couple of different ways that I think that we as consumers can think of sustainability. And, obviously it'll vary from one person to the other. But how do you think that we in general as consumers define sustainability? Both, I guess today, right? Because obviously I think it's going to continue to evolve. But how do you think people define sustainability?
Well, it's really funny. A couple of weeks ago at dinner, my son's just started A-levels and he's doing geography. And we were talking, I don't know why he brought this up, the definition of sustainability. And his view was, I think what they learned at school was sustainability was about meeting the needs of today without diminishing the needs of the next, the next generation.
That's elaborate.
Which was really interesting. So I think that was quite good. I have seen studies that have actually shown that 19% of consumers see sustainability is really lessening our environmental impact, on the earth. They believe it's that, but 50% of people actually look at the definition of sustainability as actually taking into account social and economic factors as well. So it's not just planet Earth; it's also the social ones around that. And actually, if you look at companies and measurements such as the ESG. They look at environmental, social, and governance. So it's the environment as planet Earth, but it's also about people and the way that we do things as well.
And ultimately, I think that FMCG companies, of course, sustainability is great, but ultimately, as we know, the results are what count, and making the numbers work. How does sustainability ultimately, and specifically in packaging, how can that help companies ultimately sell more and impacts purchase decisions in store?
Listen, this is a...
Like, what's in it for them ultimately?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. And, ultimately one we always have to have with our MDs who are responsible for driving the P&L and the growth of the business. So listen, for sure, how is it impacting purchase decision? I think there's several things I'd love to talk about on this topic. There is no doubt it is super important now on impacting purchase decisions. Yeah, I think 85% of European consumers now are saying that they want to buy products with as little packaging as possible. Yeah. So 85% are saying that. I think prior to COVID, something like 59% of people said that they would change where they shopped in order to buy products with less packaging. After COVID, it's gone up to 64%. Other studies have shown that basically in Europe, 1 in 2 people, so up to 50% of people are stating, so the top 3 factors for buying goods that are most important to them. One is buying local. The other one is products that are recyclable. And the other one is packaging, little packaging as possible. So those are the top 3. And it depends where you are in Europe, which one comes number 1. Like Nordics, local is really important, and then it's the other 2. But for the other places in Europe, and especially Western Europe, it's the packaging and it's recycling that are the top 2. So it is really, really important. Of course, every brand manager loves to have a study that proves that people are prepared to pay more for their particular, brand and more sustainable packaging. That's not so straightforward to answer. at all. And there's so many factors in a purchasing decision. So,
and I get the sense that it varies by category too, right? I mean, I think if you're talking about apparel versus electronics versus beverages, that answer will vary. I think there's just different dynamics by category.
Absolutely. I think, listen, all categories will eventually catch up with one another, but right now, I think you're right, it does vary. There's a lot more consumer consciousness in dairy, coffee, categories like that than maybe even baby food or cereals. Right now, jewelry, for example, fit and design is probably a lot more important than understanding where it's come from, etc. So I agree with that. But overall, consciousness across all categories has grown massively. Those stats I've spoken to, I think, speak for themselves. The other person I love listening to who talks about this quite well is Mary Portas. I don't know if you ever listened to any of her thinking and work, but she talks about shopper behavior always reflecting the cultural context of the decade that it's in. And if you look back to the 80s, consumption was very much based on wealth status. You bought a Rolex to tell everyone you had money. Into the 90s, as travel exploded and became a lot more accessible for people, stories were much more important about what, provenance, where people bought something, and that said something about them because it showed that they traveled. This cashmere I got off the goat in Peru, so to speak. 2000 eco-consciousness started to come in, but it was a little bit more niche. What was more important then was credibility, reputation. The Coca-Colas of this world, the Disneys were super important. There was credentials there. But as social media started to kind of accelerate then to 2010, that then decade started to see consumers take power and start to tell their own stories. And there you could, you'd see people queuing for iPhones. That in itself told a story. You'd see people posting, the Body Shop Eco Carrier, that would tell a big story. People would post about themselves. The anti-plastic narrative would move. People would have their big, expensive, reusable water bottles such as SIG, for example. That came through. And, where we are now is actually social media has allowed a huge amount of anti-sentiment in this space and education on what is important. So, we're now coming into this period of shopper behavior, which is known as sentience, yeah? And I think Mary Portas talks about this really, really nicely. And it's this world of empathy that suddenly consumers are going, we've had decades of overconsumption and I feel a bit guilty about it now. And I still want what I want, but actually I want to feel a sense of alignment to who I'm buying, that I share the same values. And I do care about the world we're living in. I really care about it. And I want to know what I'm buying, that it's not doing harm.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. Consumers are still telling us they're confused. We've done studies and, they're telling us we're actually confused in packaging. I don't know what I can recycle and what I can't because the information on it's not really good and there's a lot of misinformation and it's a very complex topic. So I think we're in a super interesting period now. And one of what I'd love to kind of crack where once we get over all the complexity of what we're operating in is how do we really simplify it? Because I think that's our job as marketeers. Is to really not go into periods of greenwashing, but to make sure we really understand the complexity and we simplify it so we can help consumers in this new period, make them feel comfortable about the decisions that they're making, and bring a lot of solutions to them that have done a lot of the complexity behind the scene.
And like in the next 5-10 years in the line of like sustainability, but talking about packaging and how it will evolve, what do you see happening in the next 5-10 years in terms of packaging innovation?
Oh, I think it's quite an exciting space, and a lot of things are going on in this space. What I've just talked about now, we still have to crack and simplify and do massive scale. Recyclable, circular solutions is number one. I think the one that I'm really interested in is, when you look at food, food consumption has a massive impact on ecology. And you're seeing a lot going on in the vegan or meat alternative space, which is super, super interesting. And I think we can probably take some inspiration of what's going on there in biotech, refarming of mollusks, snail mollusks, various mollusks to create, bone-like substances so that people can, eat meat alternatives, but still feels like meat. I think that's really interesting. When you go into packaging, there's a lot going on in the space of edible packaging, biodegradable packaging. You see some examples where Heinz have done some examples in there. Lucozade have just done some vending machines of, biodegradable kind of little syrups in London. I think that's super interesting. What we need to be careful on in that space is great that takes away packaging, and you therefore don't have to recycle it or something like that. But we then need to think, well, what does it take to produce that? And the land that it's being produced. So it's not always so easy. And that's when you start to look at actually, well, some, things like seaweed, which are not on land and actually in the sea, and they're actually quite sustainable to farm. And there's low ecological footprint, low carbon footprint to do it. They're very easy. And that can help us produce some really interesting new materials that could help replace problem plastics, for example. Put some massive investment into that space. It's still quite new, but I think that's where a lot of the innovation is going to go.
It's interesting you mentioned seaweed. I was listening to a podcast from Dave Chang, who's a famous chef from the US, but he was talking about just how critical, or the role that seaweed can actually play, not just in terms of packaging, but also in terms of our consumption habits as well. So it's almost like the superfood, if you will, of the future.
Absolutely. So I think that will be super, super interesting, because as we're looking, for us, a massive opportunity is consumer, food packaging. A lot of our business is in secondary packaging, but a lot of opportunity is in that space because a lot of problem plastics in that area. So I think seaweed is going to be really interesting to unlock in that area. There's other things as well, like you see this morphing pasta, for example, where there's techniques to make flat pasta so that when actually you package it and ship it, it's really small. But when you then put it in the water, it goes from 2D to 3D as well. So it becomes, and that then is a huge amount of innovation that just takes so many lorries off the road. You're not shipping as much air, etc. So super exciting space. You've also, and the world you're in now, alcoholic beverages as well. There's some interesting, progresses there from, reducing carbon footprint from going from glass bottles into paper packaging. When in Rome wine, the Absolute vodka, they're kind of circular metrics of those new packaging is so much more beneficial than what it was before with that particular progress as well.
And by the way, you mentioned Lucozade before. Let me give a shout out to Carol Robert, who I had on the pod, who's the head of Suntory Beverage and Food, who owns Lucozade. She was on the podcast a couple of years ago. So hi, Carol.
Oh, great. Super.
So Jeannine, this is pretty much par for the course. I always get so much out of our discussions and just learning what you're up to, and it's brilliant to hear everything that you've got going on at DS Smith, and it's super exciting and super interesting. I mean, I'm gonna definitely look up this morphing plaster and what edible packaging I'm able to go and explore next. So this has been great. Thank you for your time. Did want to ask you one final question is, but this is a question that we ask all of our guests, which is, given the breadth of experience that you've had in your career, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self at the beginning of your career? Like if you could look back and like Marty McFly, go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I never set out at the beginning knowing where I'd get to today. I didn't. So my advice kind of looking back is, to anyone, go and get stuck in your career early days. Go and do and deliver, and never doubt that any of the stuff that you're working on will shape what you can do and change in the future. I think that's what I would say, because if I do look back, I've been able to go on in my career and go and fix things, change things, shape things, build things that I saw as problems earlier on. And I've never lost, like those early days at Marks and Spencer, for example, I've never lost the knowledge and insight that has come from those earlier days. And all the things I've done in my career, I've then been able to, as I've progressed more senior, I've been able to unlock and change things that really would have helped things back then. But I don't know if I would have done that if I hadn't really got into it and got my hands really dirty early on in the career. So I'd say never doubt that you are always learning, and what you are learning will shape some great things you can do later on. Your career can then take a story. Yeah, it can really take a story.
This was Jeannine Ferguson from DS Smith. Good to have you meet again, Efrain. I think it brought to a very interesting conversation where I actually learned a lot about packaging, which is something that I think sometimes we can take for granted, but it's like super important.
Absolutely. It was nice to have a bit of a catch up with Jeannine, and really interesting to learn what she's been up to at DS Smith. And for me, I really found it interesting when we were chatting with her around how we as consumers define sustainability. And I think that the definition that her son gave was actually the one that really is going to stay with me in terms of thinking about it through the lens of meeting the needs of today without diminishing the needs of tomorrow. So I think that that's something that any consumer, from people our age to those younger and older than us, can take to heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's also interesting to listen to Jeannine talk about the growing influence that sustainability is having in terms of people's purchase decisions as well. I think she shared some really interesting stats around that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think she said 85% of consumers want to buy products with little packaging. So we're talking about like such a huge impact on the bottom line of companies, on the top line, and of course the bottom line, but the top line impact maybe sometimes is downplayed. Actually said that 59% of consumers would change their shopping decisions based on the packaging before COVID. Now it's actually 64%. So it's actually, this comes to show that it's a trend that's growing and growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember hearing in a podcast as well that sustainable products are actually punching above their weight class, as we would say in the US, when it comes to their share of profit or share of value in comparison to other products. And that actually also grew during COVID as well. So I think it's only growing in importance. And I think from a, let's call it above the line view, we should also remember that in essence, really, and I think Jeannine really articulated this quite well, which is that oftentimes for a lot of shoppers, it's the first glimpse into the brand experience. So it's really also critically important as a brand building tool as well. So we shouldn't forget that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when you talk thinking out jewelry, for example, super important. I mean, who could imagine like an expensive piece of jewelry to be in like a box without anything inside it, no? So that's also a good opportunity for brands in consumer goods, which is obviously a product that's less premium and less margin, but to maybe differentiate themselves even more through the packaging, no?
Absolutely. But doing so in a very sustainable sort of way and thinking about sustainability, not just through the environmental lens, but also through the social impact lens as well, which is also something that we've seen grow in importance over the last few years.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Efrain, again for participating on this with me as always. Thanks as well for Jeannine for taking the leap and coming to the FMCG guys. And as always, a shout out to our partners, the CPG guys. They're doing super interesting content, at the other side of the Atlantic. And remember to follow us on LinkedIn. That's a great way to show us support. Feel free to reach out to us, share our content, or make any suggestions you may have. And we'll see you on the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great day.